Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I'm Teena Jha, you're watching Perspective. Gross goods and services tax collections rose 7.5% year-on-year to 1.96 lakh crore rupees in July, as per the latest government data released at the start of this month. So with this, the collections remained above 1.8 lakh crore rupees for a seventh consecutive month. In June, the gross GST collection stood at 1.86 lakh crore rupees. Remember, in April this year, the GST collections had surged by 12.6% to an all-time high of 2.37 lakh crore rupees. Gross GST mop-up was 1.82 lakh crore rupees in July last year, which was 2024, while in June, the collection was 1.84 lakh crore rupees. The gross domestic revenue grew 6.7% to 1.43 lakh crore rupees, while tax from imports rose 9.5% to 52,712 crore rupees. GST refunds shot up nearly 67% year-on-year to 27,147 crore rupees, while the net GST revenue stood at 1.69 lakh crore rupees in July 2025, recording a 1.7% year-on-year growth. So on the show today, we'll discuss the key drivers behind this steady uptick in GST mop-up, and also look ahead to what measures could be on the table at the next GST Council meeting to boost revenue even further. Joining me in the studio are two distinguished guests. It gives me immense pleasure today to welcome Mr. Shashank. He's a member of Parliament of the BJP.
Thank you.
He represents Devariya constituency of Uttar Pradesh in the Lok Sabha. Next to me is Mr. Sanjay Sharan, former Commissioner of Customs and CGST. In addition to this, he's also a central government certified GST master trainer. About 51,000 officers of central and state governments train under his supervision for GST. Also joining us virtually is Professor Arvind Mohan, Department of Economics, University of Lucknow. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on the program today. Let me initiate the conversation with the policy perspective. So, Mr. Shashank, allow me to start the program today with you. What we are seeing is that the government has consistently maintained high GST collections. This is the seventh consecutive month when the collections have remained above 1.8 lakh crore rupees. What, according to you, are some of the key factors, some of the policies that perhaps you would like to point out that have enabled this kind of GST performance in the country?
Firstly, I would like to applaud the fact that many years back, the Honorable Prime Minister initiated and with great conviction made sure that the GST reforms were implemented. It was not an easy task. It was done with great aplomb. And now we are seeing the results of that. And I think it's important to note how difficult the largest democracy of the world, with so many different states, had to corral people together to get this thing done. So again, really respect the leaders who made this happen, firstly. Secondly, I think this GST at a policy level also is indicative of good economic performance. And it's not just good economic performance, it's also a barometer, a measure of things that the economy sometimes does not detect, because GDP growth on an average takes an average macroeconomic point of view. But GST starts looking at where the growth is happening and how things are happening. So I think it's a very good barometer of things to come, as well as what is happening in the economy, which, as you said, for the last 7 months has been seeing a consecutive uptick. And finally, I think this ecosystem which has been created because of GST, small, mere gaon ke bhi, they are very, very small shop holders, etc., who are now enrolling and formalizing themselves. And this behooves well for the economy, because as a result of this, more formalization will happen and we will be able to understand the real needs of the SME market and the small entrepreneurs, which requires a real boost. So once again, from a policy perspective, this is good science. More has to be done. And I think it's a great job done by the finance community, I would say, the ecosystem that has been created.
Okay, Mr. Sharan, how would you interpret this kind of GST performance, and in terms of a broad economic management by this government and some of the compliance reforms that we've seen in recent years?
You see, GST is a great reform in this country, as Honorable Member of Parliament also said. It came from 1st of July 2017, and when it came, we had a large number of taxes. There was 17 taxes and 23 cesses, which were merged into GST. And apart from that, there was problem. There were many other problems in the GST, pre-GST rather. ITC, input tax credit mechanism, which has been brought in GST, by which there is no tax on tax, which takes into account that there is no cascading of tax. So, and then e-way bill also brought the interstate economic boundaries. They were type of dismantled actually, and there would not be collection of trucks which were carrying goods on the interstate borders. So all these things have led to, and then also we had one nation, one tax and one market. So rates are same. Earlier there used to be different rates. So you name a thing, there are so many things which have been done. So that is what has led to this growth. And one more thing which I want to say is that, assuming somebody, GST is on supply of goods and services. There is somebody sitting in Delhi, he wants to supply to somebody in say Chennai. So what he will do? He has to generate his invoice, e-invoice. He has to generate his e-way bill, integrate it automatically integrates with the e-way bill, and he pays IGST and supplies the goods to Chennai. He does not have to run to Chennai. He does not have to go for those forms in Chennai. Right. Earlier there used to be C form and other forms were there. So from sitting here by generating, he is able to supply. So this way, and there are so many things. It is a very major reform, and that is what, as we are seeing, that is leading to growth of revenue because of ease of compliance. Ease of doing business is increasing. That is leading to ease of compliance. And also the government over the years tightened the areas by which it could be, the revenue leakage was there, because they have done so many measures they have taken by which the revenue, because you cannot take out your goods, you cannot move your goods without generating an e-way bill. If it is caught on the way, you will lose your goods, and apart from suffering fine, penalty and many other things, and confiscation also. So all these things have led, and were making all the states and center work together from a particular date. That was 1st of July 2017. It's a major work. So it's a huge work. That is what we are reaping the benefits. And we are also seeing the GST growth nowadays will be in the range of about 2 lakh crores per month. So it will be 24 lakhs crores for 1 year. Okay. So it is increasing like that. And also the number of persons which are paying GST revenue. Earlier there used to be about 62 lakhs. Now we have got registered persons who are paying GST is about 1.52 crores plus. It has almost doubled. E-way bills, large number of e-way bills are being generated, large number of invoices are being generated. So because of ease of doing, and you can do your GST work sitting in your home. You can do it with a laptop. You don't have to run to any place.
Absolutely.
So it is a
reform of reform. How we can further, boost that revenue is something that I'll come to in the next round. Let me bring in Professor Mohan into the discussion as well from an academic perspective. Professor, from what we've discussed so far with the Honourable Member of Parliament, with Mr. Sharan, who's been part of the system for quite long, how do you assess the centre-state sharing mechanism having evolved ever since GST has evolved, but also some of the key factors that you think has led us to this stage wherein we are seeing consistent growth in GST collections, and now we are targeting a 2 lakh crore plus collection by perhaps the end of this year?
As other panelists have rightly mentioned, I think this is an exceptional reform that India has introduced, and the dividends are there for everyone to see. One, it has been mentioned by one of the panelists, that it has resulted in free flow of goods across the country. And that is adding to both profitability and reducing cost of most of the enterprises. So as far as the private sector is concerned, I think it's a huge advantage for pan-nation movement and huge advantage for production and productivity. Equally, what we need to focus on is state finances. They have never seen this kind of growth in the past. So GST is transforming India's potential to invest, India's potential to spend, and India's potential to bring down debt. It is in my know that many of the international organizations like the World Bank, today, most of the states across India are finding much lesser need to borrow from these multilateral organizations. Reason, GST. GST has put so much funds in the hands of the state that much of state level development expenditure and all kind of other expenditures can be met with much lesser borrowing from multilateral organizations. This is changing the scenario completely. So gradually what we will see and what we are already seeing is that states and the nations, capital expenditures rising, and also our debt liabilities are changing in a very positive way. Even if we are going in for increased debt, it is more for production purposes rather than anything else. So I think both the fiscal scenario and the development scenario is getting significantly boosted by GST kind of intervention. This truly is a phenomenon.
Okay, okay. Mr. Sharan, what's striking is the 66.8%, nearly 67% spike in the GST refunds. Can we say that this reflects better efficiency, perhaps more trust and increasing trust in the system?
You know, what type of refund we are giving? If you go basically for the refund, one very small area of refund is those who are closing their business or those who have got certain credit in their records, they want to take refunds, they can do it. But what is the most major area? Most major area of refund is exports. Because even before the GST came, we had central excise regime and we had customs and central excise regime. Customs is still there. But exports are duty free, and because of that reason, whatever exports are being made, that is for the case of goods. And there are two ways in which you can get refunds. One is that you can file what is known as LUT, letter of undertaking, and without payment of duty you can export, or you pay duty, tax, that means GST, and once you file for the goods your papers, and the goods are what is known as exported by giving what is known as let export order, etc., then automatically it comes through the route in the bank account of the exporters. So that way exports is also indicating that refund more of refunds, that is basically what is more refund is mostly export related, either of goods or services or even exports to the SEZ, etc., that's also taken as exports. So that is again a positive sign that we are getting, refunds are there. I will re-emphasize one more thing. I'll reiterate that some exporter of goods, he pays duty, tax of GST, and then he makes export, and he files all his papers and his returns. It automatically flows into his account. He does not have to go and file a return. That is a major reform. So these are all the things. So it is also very positively indicative.
It's a positive sign, but how significant do you think it's for businesses, and especially in context of the MSMEs?
So I think if you look at a broader perspective, you could say that any tax, and in this case GST, is an indication of the relationship that a government has with its people, and especially in this case with its business people. And the two things which have really stood out in GST, one is the use of digital to make it easier, as has been said before. And secondly, I think there is also a secular belief in the government, so that people are willing to say that if I give tax, then I will get the results of that. And that's because under the leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister, and in Uttar Pradesh under the leadership of Yogi ji, we have delivered goods to the last mile, and this has been evident by businessmen and others. So I think these two relationships or improvement have created an enormous amount of trust. Now coming to the MSME or the small and medium enterprises, naturally initially there was some reluctance to say that can we get formalized, should we get formalized. A number of these so-called GST players are proprietorship, etc. But over a period of last 6-7 years, there has been secular trust in the GST regime. The ease of business, the ease of filing, the ease of returns that has been announced has also led to a certain amount of trust. So on the whole, I think increasingly business says that we should come into the formalized economy, because that is what is going to give us the credit ratings, the other things which MSMEs will then benefit from. So as I said, this is a great barometer for business in general, but specifically businesses which are small, it's a very good barometer, because that's where we need to focus most attention. As we know, most of the employment in this country comes from small and medium businesses, and if we can get a barometer, a temperature of that region through GSTs, it's a good sign.
Okay, Professor, another aspect that I would like your views on is on the GST from imports, which have grown nearly 9.5%. Now, explain to us what this tells about the trade trends and more importantly, their influence on revenue generation.
See, certainly as far as imports are concerned, we are finding significant rise, but that is true for every aspect of the economy, not only exports or international trade is not the only story. See, when you are looking at GST kind of intervention, few other things also need to be noted. It is, I think, Honorable MP mentioned that kind of relationship or the ecosystem that we are looking at, relationship between states and center, that has also been evolving. Also, there has been a national concern, particularly regarding very few taxpayers in the country. Literally insignificant number of people were paying taxes for a very long time. I think GST is gradually changing that. There is still a long road to cover, but we have been observing that gradually MSME, traders, shopkeepers, gradually many of them are becoming part of the story. And the kind of refund process which has been created, I think most of the producers, most of the consumers as far as raw materials are concerned, will gradually become part of the story. So I think GST story has just begun. Gradually you will find it will transform resource mobilization story in the country significantly. Already, I think we are on the right track, and 2 lakh kind of a story which we are looking at, I don't think it's far away.
Absolutely. How can we take this story further is something that I will come to in just a bit. But the data also suggests, Professor Mohan, that net revenue growth is at 1.7%. Does it indicate that there is now a need to revisit the GST rate structure, perhaps, when we talk of ensuring a stronger growth?
Certainly. We have been talking about bringing more segments, particularly petroleum segment. We have kept it out for a very long time. I think even if it requires a special rate for petroleum, gradually we'll have to bring that also into the larger GST story. Maybe we also need to look at, I think it will take some time, but the next step forward can easily be that bringing down the number of rates, lesser the number of rates we'll have, I think it will be better for the country. It may take some time, but I think we are moving towards that direction only.
I don't know how much of that can you answer, but Mr. Shashank Mani, since you represent also the government in a way on the panel today, can I ask you what possible measures can we expect, and most importantly in lines of perhaps simplification, rationalization of tax structures at the next GST Council meeting? The dates have not been announced, but most likely by the end of this month that meeting should take place.
I may not be able to make specific comments, but the general comment is that there is a fine balance between extra tax collection, which of course bolsters revenue, and making sure that the citizen does not get crowded out in the finance market. So there's always a very fine balance. Right. Our government has always consistently believed, and the Prime Minister has consistently said, that we want to have maximum governance and minimum government. So it's not as if we are in the race to have maximum tax collection. We are in the race to have tax collection which is appropriate for the economic situation. So in that spirit, if the GST Council meets and it lowers some rates because it balances out how many people are included in the GST net, then I think we will probably come to a point which is reflected earlier in the conversation, that how do we make sure that our revenues for government increases, but the citizen also has enough savings so that he or she can invest that in their own business. So it's a fine balance. It cannot be one-sided that we look at maximizing. And the second part is that, as was said before, that if we can somehow harmonize, standardize, given the fact that there are different industries which have different rhythms, the rates, then it makes it simpler for the taxpayer. As it is, digital has made it simpler, but by simplifying the tax rates also it makes it different. But keep in mind that there are two sides of the coin. There is the government side. Clearly I represent that, but I am a public representative. So I also represent the people's side. Absolutely. And I think it has to have a fine balance so that we are able to take the nation forward and yet unleash the huge entrepreneurial talents in this country without any hindrance.
Certainly. So we may see rate rationalization perhaps, or more steps to expand the tax base further when the next meeting of the GST Council happens. But since we are now talking of looking ahead, where do we go from here? And the target, Mr. Sharan, if I may take that question to you, we are now aiming confidently to reach the 2 lakh crore plus collections consistently, because we've already seen 1.8 lakh crore rupees for the last 7 months. What would it take on our side to make it the new normal, 2 lakh crore plus collection from here on?
Yeah, one area which I'll say very clearly and bluntly rather, that 2 lakh crore whatever is coming, still there would be leakage actually. The leakage has to be plugged. There would be leakage. There is no doubt about that. Because there is many things which are outside the formal economy sphere. So that is there. So that we have to plug. And then,
okay, let me take the liberty to ask you that question. You've seen the system up close. Where do we need fixing in terms of the structural inefficiencies, if there are any?
No, I will not say a structural inefficiency, but there are people who try to avoid that. I am not saying that. The structure is working all right, everything is there, and every law and regulations and systems are laid down. It is perfect. Only thing is that compliance, there could be some places which are not into it, so that we have to see that. And also for reforms, you are asking about reforms also, you are asking?
Yes, maybe some reforms which can ensure that we are not just a revenue generating country.
Yeah, you know, actually.
We need to make our system more business friendly.
Yeah, yes, I'll tell you 2-3 examples. I'll tell you. One is rate rationalization. One is there, and we have basically today. Basically, I'll use the word 4 rates are there: 5, 12, 18, and 28 rates are there. So gradually, you have to lower it down to 3, and ultimately, a time will come when we'll have to bring it down to 2 rates. In fact, that we will have to do that. Another thing which a very major concern for the trade is that when somebody supplies his goods, because GST is on supply of goods and services or both, so he is bound to pay the tax of GST, and for that the recipient is obliged to pay him back within 180 days. This is there. So he is bound. Many cases it happens that people don't have sufficient funds with them. So what happens? I have supplied something today, but in the next month I get some credit because some supplies came to me for doing that. That credit presently is not utilizable for those supplies if supposing somebody wants to make a later payment. So that whatever is available, that should be allowed to be used by him in his credit, even if he say files by late his returns and pays the revenue by late. This is one thing. So it will be a very major reform that will take place. Then also slightly, you know, making the returns little more simpler, so that everybody, because today in fact it is not possible for everybody to file return. He has to go to a CA or expert accountant, he has to go to that, or he has to take training under him. That is there. So make it more user friendly, slightly more generous. Government has done a commendable job. And not only government, I will pat my department also, that Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs. They were the pioneers who brought that in training also and in implementation also, that they have done it. So government, of course, they were at the back of it, but we were there. So they have done a commendable job. But
in fact, in addition to rationalization, simplification is another aspect that is expected to come up on the table at the GST Council meeting. But let me also take a related question, perhaps the same question, Professor Mohan, because we've created a structure. It's been quite efficient, and we are of course talking about the milestone that it has achieved. It's important to further strengthen that system, and for that we need to keep reforming it. What are some of the reforms or ideas perhaps that you think will or should India that should be prioritized to make our GST system not just revenue generating but more business friendly?
I think global comparison is in order here. If you compare India's buoyancy, tax buoyancy with other countries across the world, there is hardly any comparison. The kind of buoyancy that India has shown, just look at Europe. They are in great trouble because of these challenges. India is a huge bright spot across the globe. And GST certainly is one of the major contributors. Not that other taxes are not growing, but certainly GST is a phenomenon which we have described. That's one. If you are looking at what needs to be done for future, first thing is that the base has to be widened. And if you can widen the base, as you see, even today, there are large segments of producing sectors of India across the states, which are still not part of the GST story. We have to find ways to bring larger number of people, that is widen the base. If you are able to do that, you will also be able to bring down the tax rates. And if you bring down the tax rate, the compliance will also grow. So I think the crux of the matter is widen the base, bring down the rates. Both can happen in a parallel way. And if India is able to do that, along with maybe reducing the number of taxes and also bringing everything else, including petroleum, in this larger story, I think this is the future framework which India needs to look at.
Okay, let me take one closing comment from Mr. Shashank Mani. In addition to what's been said by Mr. Sharan and Professor Mohan, because we need to further strengthen India's GST system, what are some of the reforms or moves that India must take, that we must expect from the government in terms of the structural improvement so that our GST system is further strengthened both in terms of revenue generation, revenue efficiency, but also in terms of ease of doing business?
पहले तो मैं साधुवाद देता हूं कि एक एक्स गवर्नमेंट ऑफिशियल आज की तारीख में आर्ग्यू कर रहा है कि हम लोग को अपनी चीज़ें सुधारनी चाहिए और सरल होनी चाहिए. थैंक यू फॉर दैट, बिकॉज दैट्स द एटीट्यूड दैट अ गवर्नमेंट हैज़, दैट ऑफिशियल्स, politicians like me and others really bat for the public as much as we bat for extra revenue. So I think if we were to look at the reform, those are the two ends of the spectrum. How are the things that we can do to simplify further the tax regime? How do we do so that the processes are further simplified and digitized? And how do we therefore make sure that over a period of time, the word base was said, I would say there's a emerging middle class, which we need to make sure is enjoined, is actually inspired by the GST to say, if I formalize, I will get more benefits. So that's the side I would put from the public side. On the government side, clearly we need to make sure that our tax base increases. We have many requirements, not least now an increasing defense requirement. But I would also say that we have to be measured in that. We should not go down the path that Europe took. As I have said many times, that after World War II, Europe went from a 10% gross national product, which was made for government, to 30 years later in 1980, to about 55% for France, 45% for Germany, 35% for UK. Now, we need to do welfareism, but we need to make sure that we do not go down the same hole that Europe has started digging for itself, that it has become over-leveraged. We need to make sure that we have appropriate tax structures, but it also gives space for society and the huge entrepreneurial energy of this nation, which the Prime Minister talks about, Swavalamban, Atmanirbharta, and today, now we're talking about Swadeshi to take off, and that is important. We need to balance these two requirements, make sure that the citizen is enabled, make sure that the government is enabled with higher taxes, but proportionate taxes, which gives enough energy for Sabka Prayas.
So I think with that, we'll have to wrap up the conversation. Thank you once again, Shashank Maniji, Mr. Sharan and Professor Mohan for joining us for such an insightful and engaging conversation on the GST collections, but also the road ahead on how we can further strengthen India's GST system. And looking at the collections, the momentum that they have currently shown over the last 7 months particularly, we can say that GST and reforms in this area are not just a reform to look at, but it's an economic imperative, especially in the wake of our Viksit Bharat vision by 2047. With that, we'll wrap up the conversation. Thank you once again to all our guests, and thank you very much for your time to you viewers as well.
To watch more programs of Sansad TV, subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to like and share them.